terrifying incident took place in Jackson County's peaceful rural areas on October 31st, 1982. 24-year-old Clifford Smith was shot and killed. He was a devoted Seymour City civil servant and a U.S. Army veteran with an honorary position for his nation. For decades, this mystery persisted. Joyce Smith, Clifford's wife, reported him missing on November 4th, a few days after he was last seen on Halloween. Sadly, 2 animal trappers found his body in December of that year, close to Rockford, just north of Seymour, along the serene White River. It was a depressing sight. Officials later confirmed that Clifford had been shot in the head. Who could have carried out such a horrific deed? And why did it take this cold case more than 40 years to solve? With 46,428 residents as of 2020, Jackson County, Indiana, is a historically significant area. In 1886, the Reno Gang committed the first train robbery in American history there. The Medora Covered Bridge, the second longest 3-span covered bridge in the world, is another reason for the county's fame. Of historical landmark and source of community pride, the amalgamation of historical occurrences and sites molds Jackson County's identity, mirroring a society that cherishes its history. In this context, the Clifford Smith cold case, a protracted enigma in the county, was ultimately resolved in 2023. Born on October 1, 1958, Clifford Smith is a man whose life story is still somewhat unknown. The fact that his parents' names and his own goals are not well known lends an air of mystery to his life narrative. Clifford's family was left behind as he was buried in Scipio Cemetery following his sudden death. He was the stepfather of Jennifer Anderson and the husband of Joyce Anderson, Ronald Anderson's sister. His family network was further expanded by his 5 brothers, Leonard Smith of Indianapolis and Lonnie, Ronnie, Anthony, and Timothy Smith of Columbus. He also had a sister who lived in Indianapolis, Tamara Gibbs. Clifford demonstrated his commitment to both local and national commitments while working for Seymour City. He also honored his country as a U.S. Despite being tragically cut short, Clifford's life was deeply ingrained in his family and community, presenting a picture of a man who was a devoted civil servant as well as a loved family member. Even though his story is not fully recorded in the public domain, people who knew him do recall it, and it is woven into the greater fabric of the community he served. A haunting scene was discovered by 2 animal trappers, Scott Bridgewater and Randy Marshall, on the evening of December 1, 1982, at approximately 8 o'clock while they were traveling through the bay near the White River, which is situated north of the Rockford area. The revelation was unsettling. In a remote area roughly half a mile east of County Road 700 East and just south of County Road 800 North, they discovered a body floating in a small pool of water. This remote area could only be reached by following a dirt path that wound between fields. It led to a small area of woods that was known to flood frequently because it was close to the White River. They found a body floating face up, wearing brown boots, a black t-shirt, and blue jeans. The skin had turned a grayish color, suggesting slight decomposition, and the top part of the head and an area by the ear were missing. These were unsettling observations. Seymour and the Indiana State Police were promptly notified of the horrific finding by the trappers. The ISP at the time had a police station in Seymour, and its officers arrived on the scene without delay. After some investigation, a billfold was found in the deceased's pants pocket. Inside was an identity card that verified Clifford Smith, who was born on October 1, 1958, was the person buried there. A graphic detail uncovered during the autopsy was that the shotgun blast had caused extensive brain damage, which was the reason for the death. Multiple pieces of buckshot were discovered in the victim's head. The gun appeared to have been fired with the barrel inside the mouth based on its positioning, a detail that only added to the enigma surrounding Clifford's death. After more research, it was discovered that Clifford's wife, Joyce Smith, had reported him missing to the Stanmore Police Department on November 4, 1982. This finding not only resolved the mystery surrounding his disappearance, but also started a new phase in the inquiry into his untimely demise. Clifford's death and the circumstances surrounding it painted a dark picture of his last moments, raising many unanswered questions about what caused such a violent end. The Indiana State Police detectives began a thorough investigation to solve Clifford Smith's death mystery after finding his body in a grim manner. Their investigation quickly narrowed down to two people who were intimately connected to Clifford: Joyce, his wife, and Ronald Anderson, her brother. Their close relationship with Clifford drove this direction of the investigation and naturally led to inquiries about their possible role in the case. When confronted with the accusations, Joyce and Ronald vehemently denied any role in Clifford's tragic death. The detectives continued to search for the truth in spite of their denials. They investigate further, following up on every lead they can find and closely examining any information that might provide insight into Clifford's death circumstances. But they came to a dead end in their never-ending quest for justice. None of the leads they pursued or paths they took resulted in a significant development in the case. No one was arrested and no hard evidence linking any suspects was discovered. The investigation conducted by the Indiana State Police detectives took a significant turn as they continued their tenacious quest to unravel the mystery surrounding Clifford Smith's cruel death. The pivotal moment occurred when Clifford's spouse, Joyce Smith, chose to speak with the police and provide a statement that fundamentally altered the course of the case. Joyce Anderson's testimony on December 10, 1982, revealed a complicated and unsettling story and implicated her brother, Ronald Anderson, in a crime. According to Joyce, everything happened on October 30, 1982, around 10 o'clock at night. When Ronald and Clifford arrived with stolen goods, she was at Tim and Pat Lee's house at 112 East 13th Street in Seymour. Joyce distanced herself from the stolen goods because she did not want to be associated with them. Ronald went to fetch Tim and Pat, but he did not come back with Pat until about 11 o'clock p.m. At this point, Joyce, Clifford, Ronald, and Pat were all at the Lee residence. Joyce recalled that Clifford, who was intoxicated, had asked her to go home with him, but she had declined. She screamed out that she was so angry that she hoped something horrible would happen to him. Clifford responded with a disturbing statement about ending his own life. In the heat of the moment, Ronald vented his anger at Clifford, accusing him of being responsible for the break-in and the subsequent possession of stolen goods. Additionally, Ronald stated that Clifford had physically mistreated him all day. Joyce related the terrifying series of events in which Ronald took Tim's pump-action shotgun and loaded it with 4 red shells. Then Ronald menacingly threatened Joyce's life and urged her to remain silent about the gun. Ronald started acting erratically, demanding that Clifford go with him. Clifford hit Ronald during the ensuing altercation and then left the house. Saw that Ronald went outside and honked a car horn after Clifford. Later, Joyce was driven by Pat to her mother's house, where she saw Ronald show up later that evening. When Ronald asked to be dropped off close to the Rocks, say, skating rink the following morning, he was acting suspiciously. He had also taken Joyce's car keys and was using them to get some stolen items out of her vehicle. The suspicion that Ronald was involved in Clifford's death increased when he told Joyce not to use the car for a few days after giving her the keys back. While at Pat's house, Joyce noticed the shotgun was back where it belonged. When questioned, Ronald gave contradictory accounts of the previous night's events, while maintaining his threat to Joyce to keep quiet about the gun. Ronald's contradictory and evolving statements were revealed during the investigation by ISP Detective Jim Levins. Ronald admitted to several actions, including wiping off the shotgun shells and admitting that the weapon used was a shotgun rather than a .22 caliber rifle. He also admitted to buying acid on the day of the murder. Ronald's stories differ greatly, initially blaming Tim Lee for Clifford's death, then blaming 2 men armed with long guns. He later stated that Clifford was kidnapped and shot near the bayou in Rockford by Greg Howard, a man he met at a park, and another man. Ronald gave a detailed account of the events leading up to Clifford's death in an interview on April 13, 1982. He claimed that after an argument with Greg, Clifford was shot with a shotgun as he tried to flee. Ronald admitted to cleaning the blood from the shotgun and returning it to its original location, as well as throwing empty shells into the Rockford Dam in White River. On August 13, 2014, the case took a new turn when Roger Drew II, an ISP detective, revisited it with George Weir, a pathologist, and Roger Wheeler, the Jackson County coroner. It was found that Clifford's 1982 death certificate was still pending, and that coroner Keith Burkholder's verdict at the time indicated that Clifford had self-inflicted gunshot wounds. The investigation's zeal faded with time. The case eventually went cold due to a lack of fresh evidence or leads. It gradually faded into the background. A major breakthrough in the decades-long, unsolved Clifford Smith cold case occurred in 2015. When Detective Kip Main took up the case on September 21st, the investigation was rekindled with new eyes and a redoubled commitment. Jennifer Rodriguez, a family member, provided a critical tip on July 29, 2016, mentioning a jacket found in an attic that was connected to the suspected murderous night. Following up on this lead, Jennifer was interviewed by Detective Main and Joyce Smith, now known as Joyce Dryer, on August 2, 2016. This information fueled the investigation, prompting a search of the attic on August 15, 2016 in search of evidence. Unfortunately, this search produced no significant results. Joyce was re-interviewed on October 26 and reiterated earlier facts while adding an important detail. She claimed that on the night Clifford vanished, her brother, Ronald Anderson, or his military jacket, which she never saw again after that night. Joyce recalled hearing Ronald tell their mother that he had left the jacket at party, which piqued investigators' interest given its potential connection to the crime. During this time, Detective Main met with coroner Roger Wheeler and pathologist Whitler to discuss the case. On August 26, 2016, Ronald Anderson and his wife, Tammy, were interviewed again. An important update was added to autopsy on August 31, 2021. Dr. Whitler re-examined the case and concluded that Clifford's death was a murder. This was a watershed moment because all official documentation now reflected the new conclusion. During these interactions, Ronald's story began to change. He acknowledged that the shotgun that killed Clifford was the same one that he had loaded and taken from Tim's home. Ronald acknowledged that he had loaded the shotgun with the intention of scaring Clifford out of the house because he was angry with him. According to him, Clifford was shot by Greg Howard approximately 5 feet away, which is how Clifford died. Ronald also talked about going back to the scene of the murder to gather spent shotgun shells, which he threw into the river to obliterate any evidence. On November 7, 2017, Tammy Anderson disclosed that her spouse, Ronald, informed her that the gunman was Lonnie Smith, Clifford's brother. On February 9, 2018, Ronald refuted this claim, claiming to have been present when Clifford was killed and providing details about the events leading up to the lethal shooting. He told how he and Clifford met Lonnie and Greg at a park when they were both high on drugs. After a disagreement between Clifford and Greg, Clifford was shot in the left side of the head by Greg. Clifford's final death certificate, which was obtained on November 8, 2016, listed the cause of death as a homicidal shotgun blast to the head, causing extensive brain damage. This formal acknowledgement was a crucial turning point in the case. Ronald's accounts over the years were riddled with contradictions and alterations, revealing a convoluted web of dishonesty and jumbled memories that were probably made worse by his acknowledged drug use. He accused Tim Lee at first, then moved on to other unnamed men, and finally accused Greg Howard and Lonnie Smith in various contexts. Detective Main got in touch with Ronald and Tammy Anderson on June 3, 2021 in an effort to wrap up the case. Ronald had earlier said he would be happy to point out the precise spot where Clifford was killed, which was close to the bayou. Ronald was scheduled to lead Detective Main and Sergeant Roger Drew to the crime scene on June 4, 2021. But Ronald told the detectives he was too nervous to help and that he did not want to get any more involved when they got to his house. This concluded the conversation with Ronald Anderson. The investigation continued in spite of the numerous detours and turns in his story, assembling the disparate and contradictory accounts. Probable cause was established based on the gathered evidence and testimonies, leading to the conclusion that Ronald J. Anderson killed Clifford Anderson. A complex figure in the Clifford Smith cold case is Ronald Jack Anderson, who was born in 1962. Ronald, also going by the moniker Space Monkey, was the brother of Clifford Smith's wife, Joyce Smith. It is unknown what his parents' names are or where he was born. Ronald's life illustrates a man enmeshed in a web of his own making, intertwined with personal hardships and a criminal trajectory. His relationship with his sister Joyce and his participation in Clifford's life in Final Demise point to a tumultuous blend of emotional upheaval and family dynamics. It is not fully known how much Ronald learned about his criminal past or about his early habits. But his part in the sad circumstances surrounding Clifford Smith's passing paints a picture of a troubled, possibly deeply conflicted man. The mystery surrounding his life before and after this well-known case is further compounded by the lack of information regarding his marriage and his children. Many questions about Ronald's deeper character and a life he led beyond what the public has seen remain unanswered in his tragic crime-marred story. Exactly 41 years to the day after Clifford Smith was killed, on October 31, 2023, Ronald J. Anderson, now 61 years old, was taken into custody. A pivotal moment in the long-running Clifford Smith cold case. The Indiana State Police detectives in Seymour, who apprehended Anderson, did so without any problems. Ronald Anderson was taken to the Jackson County Jail after his arrest and is currently being held without bond. This breakthrough provided much-needed progress in a case that had been under investigation for more than 40 years. A pre-trial conference has been set for December 12, 2023, at the Jackson County Circuit Court as part of Anderson's legal proceedings. It is decided that Judge Richard Pointer will handle the case, setting the stage for the trial and choosing the direction of the legal arguments and evidence will be accomplished in large part during this pretrial conference. The jury trial is scheduled to begin at 8:30 a.m. on April 16, 2024, signifying a crucial day in the quest for Clifford Smith's justice. It is expected that this trial will be a major event in the neighborhood, shedding light on details of a case that has plagued the area for years. In a case that has been long shrouded in mystery and tragedy, Jackson County's eyes, as well as those who have followed this case over the years, will be on trial seeking justice and closure. A family that had been struggling with uncertainty and grief for more than 40 years finally felt some closure with the Clifford Smith cold case arrest. The Indiana State Police's Public Information Officer, Sergeant Stephen Wiels, considered this momentous occasion and noted the great relief it provided the Clifford family. More than just providing closure for one family, this Clifford Smith case breakthrough serves as a ray of hope for other families who are still looking for answers in unsolved cases. Indiana State Police worked hard to bring peace to more families who have been waiting for justice by working towards similar resolutions to other unresolved cases. Clifford's brother, Leonard Smith, conveyed the relief and long-held belief of his family at the news. Hotel cleaning personnel at the Windsor Motel in Arizona found 45-year-old Canadian Barbara Callow dead on April 5, 2005. Barbara had come to Lake Havasu City from Canada specifically to witness the blooming desert wildflowers. Barbara was last seen alive at approximately 8:40 p.m. When the hotel staff saw her, it was the night before. Investigative efforts were launched to find the real reason behind Barbara Callow's death. Nearly 20 years later, these efforts paid off when the culprit was identified, thanks to developments in DNA technology. Two important questions remain as we delve deeper into this mystery. Since Barbara Callow was only a visitor from another country who could have been the murderer, what possible reason might have existed for this horrible act? Do follow along to learn more about this tragic tale. This case takes place near the California-Arizona border in Lake Havasu City, which is located on the lake's eastern shore. Almost 1 million people visit this well-liked location each year. In addition to offering a perfect climate, a variety of dining options and lodging, it is well known for its historic London Bridge, crystal clear lake, friendly community, plenty of sunshine, and numerous annual events. Generally speaking, the city has a lower crime rate than the state of Arizona. The killing of Barbara, however, shocked the neighborhood on April 5, 2005. It was an eerie incident that was unusual for the otherwise tranquil area. Barbara Irene Callow was born in 1960, the parents Bridget Callow and Werner Callow in Toronto, Canada. Additionally, she had a younger brother named Peter, to whom she had a close bond. Her early years were spent in Toronto. Barbara demonstrated exceptional intelligence and a distinct career goal from a very young age. She continued her studies at the Veterinary College of the University of Guelph, where she graduated with a master's degree. Barbara's passion for knowledge was evident when she decided to pursue a career as a researcher after completing her studies. Her talents were acknowledged by the Canadian federal government in 1992, when they hired her to work as a meat inspector. She eventually advanced to a position in the science branch where she gave insightful advice on issues pertaining to animal health after making the switch to veterinary biologics over the years. Her co-workers respected her for being a bright, daring, and self-starting person. Barbara was a multifaceted individual who enjoyed gardening, cycling, arts, and bird watching when she was night work. She was also deeply passionate about traveling. Barbara's bright future, however, was tragically cut short on March 25, 2005, when she left Ottawa for a vacation. Barbara, then 45, had decided to take a solo vacation in 2005. Seeing the enchanting bloom of desert wildflowers in the heart of Arizona was the main purpose of her plan. On March 25th, she departed from her Ottawa residence and set out on her quest. Her initial destination was British Columbia, and she proceeded to Las Vegas, Nevada from there. On March 26th, she rented a car and set out on her journey. After that, Barbara took a car to Yuma, Arizona, and spent a day exploring the area. She then took a car to Lake Havasu City, Arizona, her ultimate destination, eager to carry on exploring. She arrived at the Windsor Inn Motel on April 2nd, intending to use her room as a cozy base for day trips into the breathtaking Arizona scenery. Barbara's journey was an adventure full of hope and the promise of new experiences, not just a quest to see wildflowers. However, this promising adventure would soon take an unexpected turn. The motel staff last saw Barbara on April 4, 2005, at approximately 8:40 p.m. She called her mother, Bridget, in Toronto later that evening to let her know she would be staying an extra day in Lake Havasu before traveling to Las Vegas to catch her flight home. But when morning came, Barbara was nowhere to be seen at breakfast. Her absence worried the housekeepers, so they went to see how she was doing. They were shocked to find her dead body in the motel room. Without delay, they made a police call. Following the 911 call, police showed up quickly and went into Barbara's room. As soon as possible, the police searched the room and took the body for an autopsy. At the scene of the crime, investigators gathered potential suspect DNA evidence and preserved it for potential use in the future investigation. Her death was later determined by an autopsy to be asphyxiation, caused by being smothered by a pillow. The fact that her room was empty of her wallet, credit card, phone, identification, and the very pillow that was thought to have been used in her murder was another unsettling detail. Also, the fact that the rental car she had driven was also stolen and was eventually discovered abandoned 2 days later, along Interstate 15 in the Mojave Desert of California added to the mystery. According to Lake Havasu Police, Lieutenant Joe Archie, Barbara might have confronted someone trying to break into her rental car. Though it is more likely that she was in the wrong place at the wrong time, it is still possible that she knew the person. The car appeared to be the main attraction in what appears to be a crime of opportunity. But for some reason, something happened that turned this into something ugly. When her brother learned of Barbara's terrible demise, he immediately took a plane from Toronto to Lake Havasu City to retrieve her remains. In spite of their extreme shock and distress over the unexpected and perplexing circumstances surrounding Barbara's death, the local community's investigators were motivated to see justice served. The fact that violent incidents were uncommon in Lake Havasu City was also mentioned by Charlie Canson, the city's at the time. Despite early efforts, the case was ultimately abandoned due to a dearth of convincing evidence and slow progress in DNA technology. In 2018, a ray of hope appeared for Barbara's family after years of uncertainty and increasing suffering. The Criminal Investigations Unit and Cold Case Squad of the Lake Havasu Police Department made the decision to reopen the case. They went over the evidence again, including the DNA that was taken at the scene of the crime in 2005. It was a major breakthrough when they finally identified a suspect. Barbara's tragic death was suspected to have been caused by 60-year-old Stacy Childs. This was a significant step toward bringing Barbara Callow and her bereaved family justice. Born in Santa Cruz, California in 1962, Stacy Childs has an alarming record of legal run-ins. Although not much is known about his parents or early years, his criminal history says a lot. He had previously been found guilty in California of a number of charges before there was any reason for suspicion. His list of crimes included a 2012 felony conviction for receiving stolen property, a 2005 felony conviction for eluding a peace officer, a 2004 felony conviction for false imprisonment, and a 2018 misdemeanor for threatening to injure someone. He received sentences of more than 2.5 years in San Quentin State Prison for the last 2 counts. Childs was immediately taken into custody on April 26, 2022, following his identification as the murder suspect in Barbara's demise. Childs' trial got underway pretty quickly. He was originally accused of second-degree murder after his arrest. During the trial, Amanda Clairhout, the deputy county attorney, disclosed that there was a missing pillow and foam cord from room 139 of the motel where Barbara had lodged. She also mentioned that a medical examiner report noted significant evidence, including the laceration to Callow's cheek, bruising around her neck, and literature marks on her feet. A re-examination of DNA evidence taken from Childs in 2008 and under the victim's fingernails in 2005 marked a turning point in the case. The choice to prosecute Childs for the crime was made in 2022 after this analysis. Paul Amon, Childs' defense lawyer, countered that his client had voluntarily provided a DNA sample and had assisted with the police investigation. Childs, according to Amon, angrily denied having anything to do with Barbara's murder, even though the jury deliberated for more than 4 hours over the course of 2 days during the trial. They eventually told Judge Derek Carlisle that they were unable to reach a unanimous decision. Judge Carlisle then ruled that the trial was a mistrial and released the jury to continue their deliberations. Amanda Clairhout, the deputy county attorney, declares she intended to retry Childs after the mistrial, but the judge stepped in and ordered a quibble verdict, which allowed Childs to be released from the adult detention facility. Ultimately, Stacey Childs was freed from detention. Though his future remained uncertain, he continued to deny any involvement in Barbara's murder. For her family, the loss of the free spirit Barbara remains a great burden. Her neighbors and friends were still missing the compassionate person she was when she was not around. Even after Childs was found not guilty, there are unanswered questions regarding who might have killed her and how the DNA evidence connected to Childs. This case is shrouded in uncertainty, so the Callow family is left searching for answers. Those who knew Barbara recall her as independent, adventurous, and full of life. They also recall her as having a strong desire to travel and take in the beauty of the world. Her mother can still clearly recall the day of the trip. She said, she claimed to have taken a trip to see the blooming cacti and white flowers. California was supposed to have an incredible year for bloom because of the rain. Her neighbor recalled her saying, she just wanted to go for a rest and just be quiet. She had no one with her, but she was a very friendly person. While the family was unable to have backed their loved one, they believed that the police apprehending the perpetrator was a step toward healing. Despite his acquittal, the family continues to seek answers and mourns the untimely death of their beloved daughter. Barbara Callow's case is tragic and complicated. The outcome of the case is marked by uncertainty because it is still unresolved, and the truth about Barbara Callow's death remains elusive. However, such cases highlight the complexities and challenges of solving cold cases, as well as the importance of advances in forensic technology. It also emphasizes the importance of justice and closure for victims' families and the community. Let us now hear your thoughts on this case. What potential obstacles do you believe the prosecution and defense faced during Stacey Childs' trial, and how might these have influenced the outcome? Do you believe there is hope for a resolution in cold cases like Barbara Callow's in the future, given advancements in forensic technology and DNA analysis? Or are there constraints that could prevent justice from being served? On a seemingly ordinary day, on June 1, 1986, 16-year-old Elaine Doyle ventured out for a night of fun with her friends at Greenock Celtic Supporters Club. Little did she know that this would be her last outing. The club, originally established as a charitable organization for the impoverished in Glasgow's East End, was the backdrop for a chilling mystery that unfolded that night. In the quiet town of Greenock, Scotland, Elaine disappeared without a trace, leaving her family completely unaware of the impending tragedy. The following morning, the town awoke to the sound of sirens and police cars as everyone grappled with the question of what could have happened to this young woman during the short 15-minute journey from the club to her home. Was she deliberately targeted? And if so, what could anyone possibly have against a teenage girl? The roots of Greenock, Scotland can be traced back to 1711, when a fishing community laid claim to the land. Over the next 2 centuries, the village flourished into a bustling port and industrial hub. During World War II, it even served as a French naval base. With its rich history, the picturesque town attracts many tourists. However, despite its allure, Greenock is not particularly known for its security. Sadly, Elaine Doyle's case was just one of many tragedies that occurred during that time. Elaine was the cherished daughter of Maureen and Jack Doyle, with her brother John being her only sibling. She was a bright and optimistic young girl. She always looked towards the future. At the age of 16, when she vanished, she was already working at a jewelry store. Thanks to her warm and inviting personality, she had a vast circle of friends. Among her citizens band, named CB Radio Friends, she was affectionately known as the Golden Girl due to her affinity for the color yellow. On June 1st, 1986, Elaine had gone to the Green Act Celtic Supporters Club to enjoy a night out with these same friends. Her compassionate nature and friendly demeanor often led her to volunteer at social clubs like this one. She informed her mother that she would be returning home late that night, around midnight. However, when Elaine didn't arrive even after the expected time, Maureen, trusting her daughter's judgment, simply assuming that she had stayed over at a friend's house for the night. It wasn't until the morning of June 2nd that the family would wake up to devastating news. As Maureen opened her living room curtains, she was met with the sight of numerous police cars parked outside in the neighborhood. Later, she would discover that a local resident had stumbled upon a body dumped on a lane across Arguin Street, where Elaine resided, during his morning walk at 7:30 a.m. Due to the close-knit nature of the town, he immediately recognized Elaine's face. Horrified, he promptly contacted the police. The responsibility of delivering the tragic news to the family fell upon the police. The family was shattered upon identifying the lifeless body. No parents should ever have to witness the state in which Elaine's corpse was found. Her body bore severe bruising, particularly evident as deep purple marks along her neck. She was completely unclothed, with only a bra attached to her arm. However, her clothes were neatly folded and placed beside her. Given the visible bruising on her neck, the police suspected that strangulation was the likely cause of death. Additionally, the presence of a black eye led the investigating officers to believe that Elaine had fought back against her attacker. Upon receiving the autopsy report, their suspicions were confirmed as the cause of death was officially determined to be asphyxiate due to strangulation by ligature. The autopsy findings also indicated that Elaine was likely strangled while facing downwards, with the culprit tightening the ligature from behind her neck. Forensic scientist Pauline McSorley, who conducted the autopsy, discovered DNA evidence on Elaine's face and chest. Additionally, broken pieces of bracelets and chunks of hair were found near the body. The presence of extensive bruising and defensive wounds further supported the police's belief that a struggle had taken place between the culprit and the victim. Unfortunately, the crime scene had not been properly handled, with evidence being mishandled without protective gear. As a result, over 41 DNA samples were found at the scene, all of which were accounted for except for one. It was theorized that this remaining unaccounted sample belonged to the culprit. Through questioning Elaine's friends in the neighborhood, the authorities were able to establish her whereabouts until midnight, when she was with her friend Lynn McCurdy. They had separated from their other friends to buy hamburgers, making them the last known individuals to have seen Elaine alive. After that point, none of her friends reported seeing her again. A local girl claimed to have heard loud screams around 12:40 a.m., but no further useful details were available to the authorities. The severity of the incident and the extent of abuse suggested a possible sexual motive behind the attack. The detective successfully located Elaine's handbag outside the Watt Library on Union Street on June 9th. The bag had been severely burned, indicating an attempt to destroy any potential evidence. The case of Elaine Doyle is renowned as one of the most extensive manhunts in Scotland's history. It involved conducting numerous interviews and compiling a suspect list that exceeded 700 individuals. Despite these efforts, the investigators were unable to identify the perpetrator. Even after exploring multiple leads and conducting numerous interviews, the investigators remained no closer to solving the heinous crime. Eventually, the case went cold as no new leads emerged. Over the years, Elaine's parents and the entire community anxiously awaited answers. The case remained a perplexing mystery, and hope began to fade. However, in 2012, nearly 28 years after Elaine's death, renewed interest in the case arose when investigators stumbled upon old case files. They discovered that John Doherty, a person of interest mentioned in the reports, had never been interviewed. Several witnesses had cited him near the crime scene on the night of the incident. Intrigued by this revelation, the investigators decided to pursue it further. Upon further inquiry, they found that Doherty had even been mentioned in a statement during the initial investigation, but for unknown reasons, he was never questioned. Although the detectives did not have high expectations due to the significant passage of time, they felt compelled to speak with him in order to tie up loose ends. Doherty, who was 21 years old at the time of the incident, initially claimed that he was at his parents' house in Greenock. However, under further police questioning, he eventually admitted to being at the disco on the night of the incident. In order to fulfill their final requirement, the police requested a DNA sample from Doherty, which he willingly provided. The shock was overwhelming once the police inputted the information into the database. It was revealed that John Doherty's DNA was a perfect match to the one found at the crime scene and on Elaine Doyle's body. Born in 1964 and residing in Dunoon, Argyll in Scotland, Doherty had previously served as a soldier before retiring and becoming a bus driver. On the surface, his life seemed ordinary, with a long-term relationship and a daughter. However, everything was about to change as his past crimes finally caught up with him. Following the confirmation of his DNA, Doherty was promptly arrested and later convicted on June 17, 2014, after a 52-day trial. Leading the prosecution was John Scodian. Authorities were able to gather enough evidence based on the extent and location of the Lane's injuries. It was deduced that she had been forcefully grabbed by the hair, struck on the head, and dragged into the lane where she was assaulted and ultimately found. The presence of Doherty's DNA at the crime scene further supported the claim that he had been with her that fateful night. The prosecution painted a vivid picture for the jury, reconstructing the events of the incident through a compelling narrative. They alleged that Doherty had caught Elaine off guard, forcibly removed her clothing, and then strangled her from behind with a ligature while she lay face down on the ground. Fortunately, the police were able to locate a witness named Martin Brown, who came forward to testify and provide additional credibility to their case. According to Brown, he had allegedly witnessed Doherty following Elaine into the lane, appearing angry as he trailed behind her. John Doherty refuted all of these allegations and enlisted the services of QC Donald Femmel to mount his defense. Femmel skillfully presented a counterargument against the DNA evidence, asserting that it was insufficient and should not be deemed a reliable source of proof. He contended that due to the evidence being stored away for more than 2 decades, there was a high possibility of contamination or tampering. The defense's argument held weight considering the numerous errors committed during the handling of Elaine's case. Not only was there a lack of proper forensic equipment and knowledge on how to handle a crime scene at the time of the incident, but it was later discovered that the officers had also failed to wear protective gear while collecting evidence. Furthermore, the credibility of the witness testimony was called into question. Martin Brown, the eyewitness in question, was colorblind when he was asked to examine black and white photographs of individuals resembling the perpetrator. He was able to eliminate all but 3 individuals, initially identifying someone else in his statement before eventually naming John Doherty. Brown's credibility was further undermined when he revealed that it took him a decade to come forward because he had only recently recognized Elaine's face in a newspaper and realized that she was the same woman he had seen on the night of the incident. The defense argued that it was unjust to blame Doherty, as the news of a contaminated crime scene had not been disclosed prior to the trial. They claimed that the officers handling the case were negligent and could have mishandled the DNA sample, leading to a match with Doherty due to contamination. However, their argument was swiftly dismissed when the forensic scientists responsible for the crime scene testified that it was 560,000 times more likely for the DNA found at the scene to belong to Doherty than any other unrelated male. Despite the counterarguments, the jury ultimately sided with the prosecution, resulting in John Doherty being declared guilty by a majority verdict. This case became one of the longest-running cases in Scotland, with the culprit being apprehended after nearly 3 decades thanks to DNA evidence. In 2014, Doherty was finally convicted in a high court in Edinburgh and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 21 years by Lord Advocate Frank Mulholland. Mulholland justified the severity of the sentence by emphasizing the brutality of the crime. Elaine Doyle, who was simply walking home that night when she became a victim of this heinous crime, had her brother John Doyle expressed his belief that the sentencing was appropriate and just. He further clarified that despite the lengthy process of obtaining justice for his sister, they found solace in the fact that she could finally find peace. On behalf of his mother, he acknowledged that the pain of losing a loved one never truly fades, but the resolution of the case provided a glimmer of hope amidst their sorrow. The family expressed gratitude for the apprehension of the perpetrator, as it brought a sense of closure. However, their grief was compounded when John Doyle's 17-year-old son Jack was tragically stabbed to death in Greenock in 2012. John's father, also named Jack, was unable to bear the loss and subsequently passed away, adding to John's immense devastation. Despite the overwhelming sorrow he had to endure, he remained thankful that at least one of the culprits was apprehended and brought to justice. Let's travel back to Tulsa, Oklahoma, on October 22, 1984, when the city was left baffled as 18-year-old Annette Craver disappeared without a trace. The police searched the area in an effort to find the truth, but they were unsuccessful, and the teenage married girl's whereabouts remained a sinister mystery. Despite the fact that her disappearance remains a mystery, the police were concerned that it might actually have been a horrifying homicide. It turned out that this situation was much more complicated than it seemed. In the long run for justice, a man was found at the center of it all, and for an incredible 54 years, his perverted viewpoint would prevail over the pursuit of justice before justice finally prevailed. What might have happened to Annette, a young, beautiful teenage girl? Why did it take so long to solve the mystery of this chilling case? Who was this maniac that took her away? Tulsa, a city in Oklahoma, is captivating with a distinctive fusion of tradition and modernity. This city, which is tucked away in the middle of America, offers a vibrant way of life that is enriched by its varied cultural scene. Tulsa is renowned for its exquisite architecture, well-preserved art installations, vibrant performing arts community, and succulent barbecue restaurants. The city is also well known for its long history of oil production and for being the birthplace of the famous Route 66. Tulsa has battled crime despite its accomplishments. The city's violent crime rate exceeded the national average in 2020, making it one of the most dangerous cities in the country. Further emphasizing the negative aspects of the city, Tulsa also saw the mysterious disappearance of Annette Craver. Annette Michelle Craver was born on December 7, 1965, in Houston, Texas, but little is known about her early life. In 1979, when her father tragically died in a car accident, things took a significant turn. The heartbreaking incident had a negative impact on Annette's emotional health. Annette's mother, Mary Rose, observed a noticeable shift in her daughter's behavior, noting that she became more reclusive and frequently turned to solitude for comfort. Annette was by herself a lot of the time. She was constantly creating art and writing poetry. She would also occasionally pick up a guitar. Mary was aware, deep down, that her cherished daughter had been experiencing great hardships as a result of her father's passing. A significant event took place on September 8, 1981, when Mary organized a yard sale in Houston to sell her late husband's possessions. 15-year-old Annette actively helped her mother sell off her father's possessions. Despite her lack of expression, it was clear that Annette had not yet recovered from the devastating loss of her father. Mary worried about Annette's isolation and loneliness, but she was unaware that Annette wasn't actually feeling lonely. Unknown to Mary, Annette had been involved with a charming man who had a sizable age difference. In addition to being older than Annette, the man was even older than Annette's mother. Mary's first encounter with Annette's friend, 40-year-old Felix Vale, occurred at the yard sale. Mary didn't suspect anything and never entertained the thought that there might be more going on. As Felix approached Annette to talk, Mary noticed the obvious age gap. Mary struggled with the burden of financial difficulties following the death of her husband. After finding it difficult to find employment in Houston, she considered moving away in search of work and better opportunities to give her daughter a better life. Mary overcame a number of obstacles and was rewarded for her perseverance when she received a job offer in Oklahoma. But there was still a lot to worry about. Annette, who had already missed 2 academic years, was about to receive her high school diploma. Mary was aware that her daughter's academic progress might be jeopardized by a sudden move to another state. When faced with this decision, Mary went with her plan of action. She asked a friend for help in taking care of Annette while she relocated to Oklahoma in search of employment. Although the plan seemed good at first, it soon started to fall apart for Mary. As time went on, a growing worry became apparent. The bond between Annette and Felix appeared to have grown stronger while she was away. As she watched the 40-year-old man become more involved in her daughter's life, Mary couldn't help but feel uneasy. This was a circumstance that greatly disturbed her. After Annette graduated from high school, Mary was able to buy a new home thanks to her diligent saving. She registered the house under both of their names with the hope of reuniting their lives and living together once again. Mary's thoughts of a long-awaited reunion were dashed after she learned that Annette had left when she got back to Houston. Mary discovered that after Annette graduated high school, Felix immediately suggested a road trip to her. Captivated by his charm, she happily accepted his offer. Over the course of 1983, Mary did occasionally get letters from Annette, each coming from a different place. Then one day, a call from her daughter, who was at the time living in California, arrived. Hearing from Annette gave Mary a rush of happiness, but the conversation quickly became concerning. Annette, who was only 17 years old at the time, asked her mother for permission before she married Felix Vale. Annette seemed to have already made up her mind, despite Mary telling her daughter it would be a mistake to marry Felix, advising her to wait until she was at least 18 years old. Annette allegedly declared her love for Felix Vale and intended to wed him in Mexico. Mary struggled with a difficult decision, knowing that she might lose her daughter who was very involved with Felix. She was aware that refusing a daughter she hadn't seen in a while could have its own effects. She consequently gave the marriage her approval with a heavy heart, believing her daughter to have good judgment and not realizing Felix was a bad man. But the perfect married life Annette had pictured would soon start to fall apart. Annette opened up to her mother in letters written shortly after their wedding. She revealed that Felix had changed unsettlingly, becoming more and more domineering. She shockingly revealed that Felix had even forced her to have an unauthorized abortion after learning she was pregnant with his child. Mary begged Annette to come home right away, consumed with worry for her daughter's safety. Annette eventually mustered the strength to escape Felix's grip in 1984 and made her way back to her mother. However, when Mary finally caught a glimpse of her daughter, she couldn't help but notice that she had changed. Annette had lost her identity. She was constantly perplexed by everything. Mary believed that her daughter was simply overwhelmed by Felix's attempts to manipulate and control her life. Mary found comfort in being reunited with her daughter amidst the changes. But this joy was short-lived. They were unhappy not long after Annette returned. Felix began tormenting their home with relentless phone calls and his insistence on speaking to Annette. Mary was unmoved and maintained her position, determined to defend her daughter at all costs. However, things got worse in October 1984. When Felix was able to breach Mary's house's perimeter, boldly entering without permission and making his way up to Annette's room, the two spent some time talking privately in Annette's room. When they eventually came out to Mary, they would say something that would break her heart. Mary was sternly instructed to leave the house by them. Mary tried to patch things up with Annette, despite her heartbreak, but her efforts were in vain. Annette remained controlled under Felix's sway and was unresponsive to any opposing viewpoint. Mary gave up her share of the home as a result, packed her belongings, and moved to California with a heavy heart. The nightmare did not end there, though. When Annette turned 18 years old, she made a big decision by claiming the inheritance her late father had left for her. Surprisingly, she allegedly transferred all the money into Felix's account and gave him legal ownership to her home. Mary attempted to contact her daughter after learning of this worrying development, but for some reason she was unable to reach her. She then wasted no time and contacted Felix right away. Felix asserted that Annette had requested going to Mexico on her own and that he had put her on a bus. On October 22, 1984, Mary immediately called the police and reported her daughter missing. Following receipt of the missing person report, the Tulsa police moved quickly to speak with Felix Vale in an effort to gather any information they could. Unfortunately, the police were also manipulated by Felix, just like Annette. Mary had a strong hunch that Felix was concealing the truth and had a significant role in Annette's disappearance. Despite her convictions, the police were persuaded by Felix's remarks and gave up looking for Annette Craver. Felix was successful in persuading the authorities that Annette had left alone on her own volition. Mary was left feeling helpless and clinging to the steadfast hope that her daughter would one day return after being repeatedly ignored by law enforcement regarding her daughter's disappearance. She sat by the phone for years, hoping Annette would call to say hi on special occasions like her birthday and Mother's Day, but sadly nothing ever happened. By 1991, a startling 7 years had passed without a significant development in the search for Annette Craver. Mary wrote hundreds of letters in an effort to contact the police, but neither they nor the FBI were interested in getting back to her. Even Felix didn't respond to the letter she sent him. Mary had the sobering insight that depending on others would be fruitless. She made the decision to conduct an independent investigation. Due to her tenacity, Mary initially tried to learn more about Felix using the developing internet's resources, because she was convinced he held the key to Annette's disappearance. However, there wasn't a lot of online information available in the 1990s. Mary's unwavering diligence allowed her to track down a single but crucial lead, which was Sue Jordan, Felix's sister. Mary traveled halfway across the country to meet her, spurred on by hope and the potential for learning crucial information. Mary was informed by Sue Jordan that Felix had a wife who had drowned. With the help of this promising information, Mary was able to locate Mary Horton Vale's family in Louisiana in 1993. Mary Horton Vale was Felix's first wife. Her efforts paid off when she was able to track down Mary Horton's brother, Will Horton, who had only been 15 when his sister tragically drowned in the Calcasieu River. Will Horton described his sister with a warm heart during Mary's encounter with him. He said, "My sister was so very special, so thoughtful and kind." He spoke of her with fondness. Felix Vale, his brother-in-law, was not accorded the same sentiment, though. Will Horton revealed that his family had a clear grudge against Felix. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale's ancestry can be found in Louisiana, where she was born on February 16, 1940. She assumed the position of editor for the school newspaper. She was also named the Eunice High School Homecoming Queen. When she was attending McNeese State College in 1960, to further her education, her path crossed with Felix's. Amazingly, the two exchanged wedding vows just 6 months after they first met. In 1961, their union produced a Bill Vale, their son, was welcomed into the world by Mary. Felix, however, acted otherwise. With the birth of their child, Felix's attitude changed noticeably. He began to treat his first wife with a controlling attitude, much like he did with Annette later. He even threatened her, telling her what would happen if she got pregnant again. Mary Elizabeth Horton Vale became pregnant once more the following year, despite Felix's warning. Felix was enraged by the news, driving her to seek safety from his fury. She and her son, Bill, fled to her mother's house out of fear of his wrath. Mary Horton considered divorcing Felix, but her mother advised her to go back and try to make amends with him. Mary's life tragically ended before they could settle anything. On October 28, 1962, Mary Horton and Felix Vale went fishing along the Calcasieu River. In an unfortunate turn of events, Mary drowned to death. Felix described what happened when he was questioned by the police. According to him, Mary allegedly drowned after she unintentionally fell off the boat. The Horton family, remained dubious of this account and found it difficult to believe. Felix quickly rose as a top suspect in the investigation. As a result of the murky circumstances surrounding Mary's drowning, she was found dead in a place that was unsuitable for fishing. After being found 2 days later, her body underwent an autopsy, which turned up red flags. Mary had bruises on her neck, right calf and left leg, which suggested that she may have fought before being forced into the water. Authorities discovered a scarf that had been wrapped around her neck and put in her mouth, suggesting traumatic asphyxia, a type of suffocation. This discovery provided additional damning evidence. The detectives were confident Felix was the murderer in light of the mounting evidence, but the coroner had a completely different take. He thought the evidence was insufficient to convict Felix. Felix also vehemently denied being guilty. He was released in January 1963 after a Calcasieu Parish grand jury declined to indict him. At the time, Mary Horton's family was devastated and felt cheated by Felix's release. Mary Rose, Annette's mother, was more enraged by what she had heard as Will Horton broke down, relaying this tragic information. Will described how the loss of his sister devastated their mother and left a void in his heart that would never be filled. At that point, Mary Rose's pursuit of justice included a steadfast search for justice on behalf of Will's sister, Mary Horton, in addition to her daughter. Though before the two women could receive justice and the police could be fully involved, Mary Rose understood the need for more concrete evidence than just statements. Thankfully, she was no longer fighting for justice by herself. Will Horton tells Mary that since 1975, he has been getting calls from people asking about a girl who vanished in Sulphur in 1973. The fact that the girl in question was Sharon Hensley, Felix's ex-girlfriend after Mary Horton, added to the unsettling nature of the situation. Sharon Hensley's mother called for years to inquire as to whether Sharon had been seen. Mary Rose began a new journey in her search for knowledge. She soon understood that her daughter was not Felix's only victim. In 1994, she made her way to Bismarck, North Dakota to meet with Sharon Hensley's brother, Brian. Brian characterized his sister as independent. In the summer of 1970, Sharon Hensley, who was born on December 20th, 1948, left her home in Bismarck, North Dakota. She aimed to welcome a new beginning in her life as she joined other free-spirited people who are forging their journey in the wake of the renowned Summer of Love. Sharon Hensley's ultimate destination was San Francisco. She was able to accomplish her objective, but the reality that met her was a far cry from the idyllic life she had imagined in her North Dakota sanctuary. Her path instead took her to Felix Vale. Felix, at that time, adopted an unconventional lifestyle and embraced a nomadic existence after the death of his first wife. During this stage, he even assumed the persona of a traveling preacher and founded his own personal cult group called the Holy Order of Mans. During this time, Sharon Hensley, then age 21, met Felix. In 1972, 2 years after leaving, Sharon visited her parents' house in Bismarck with her new boyfriend, Felix Vale. But their daughter had undergone a change. The once vivacious North Dakotan girl who loved to dance and hang out with her friends now seemed distant. Her parents were worried that her independence was being supplanted by the influence of her new boyfriend. Her parents were uncomfortable after the meeting, but Sharon, who was an adult, decided to leave with Felix. She had the freedom to choose her own course of action. Nevertheless, her parents' concerns grew more serious. They believed Felix was exposing their daughter to a dangerous lifestyle, one characterized by drug use and irresponsible conduct. But not even they could have predicted what lay in store for the future. In a short period of time, Sharon joined Felix's cult group and interacted with them. Her involvement, though, came at the same time as the dramatic change in their relationship. At the time, Felix's drug use increased and his behavior changed, becoming more violent and domineering. During those times, Sharon's family thought she was with him out of fear. She had no idea how to escape the predicament. Along with Felix, Sharon was about to travel to South America. But before beginning this journey, she called her mother one last time to say goodbye. Her mother sensed something was wrong, though she couldn't quite put her finger on what it was. Her maternal instincts were spot on, because after that final communication, Sharon stopped calling or writing. She disappeared with no trace. In a letter to Sharon's family in 1973, Felix claimed that he had last seen Sharon in Key West. His story was that she had left him and gone sailing around the world with an Australian couple. The Hensley family, however, had skepticism about everything Felix said, as was a common theme in all of these cases. In February 1973, Sharon's family reported her missing, but regrettably the police did nothing for a full year. A dated newspaper report filled the gap even though there were immediate investigations or initial police support. The story from the old newspaper caught Brian Hensley's attention. The news report from 1970 mentioned Sharon and Felix's arrest. According to the report, a young boy of about 8 years old showed up at the police station and asked for help to go back home. Bill Vale, the son of Mary Horton and Felix Vale, was revealed to be the child. Bill, an 8-year-old boy, went to the police station without shoes or socks and complained that his father was forcing him to smoke marijuana and that he wanted to return home. The Horton family was unaware that Felix had taken Bill with him when he left for California following Mary Horton's passing. Bill was compelled to follow his troubled father wherever he went from that point on. Additionally, the police discovered that Bill had a history of violence. The police also discovered that Bill had experienced abuse during this time before escaping and making his way to the police station. Felix and Sharon were detained for endangering a child. However, it is unknown how the two managed to escape the police custody. When Mary Rose heard about all of these things from Sharon's brother, she made the decision to meet Bill Vale. She thought Bill might be a source of vital information because he had valuable knowledge about where Felix was. With this goal in mind, Mary set out for Kansas to meet with Bill and his family. Mary Rose said Bill was very honest. He treated her with a lot of kindness and sympathy. Mary observed that despite being a good man, he was terrified of his father. Bill was initially apprehensive to share much information, for fear that doing so might unintentionally bring Felix closer to his own wife and kids, but his desire to help Mary and obtain justice for his mother won. Bill made the decision to seize this opportunity after realizing its importance. He gathered the courage to divulge the dark secrets that might support Mary's claims. Bill described an important event that happened in 1970, just before he fled and arrived at the police station. He had unintentionally overheard his father, Felix, and Sharon talking to each other. Bill claimed that Felix admitted to Sharon that he had killed Mary Horton, his mother. Bill sought refuge with his grandparents after Sharon and Felix were detained in 1970, which resulted in a significant change in his life. Despite this alteration, he continued to be afraid of his father, especially since he was required to testify against him in court throughout the trials. This fear of his father's return increased his anxiety, and tragically Felix did return in 1975. Felix arrived at Bill's grandparents' house and asked to see his son. The fact that Sharon was no longer with Felix added to Bill's fear, which was already strong. When Bill inquired about Sharon, Felix responded that Sharon would never bother anyone again. Bill, who was only 13 years old, understood what he meant, but he had no way to put that knowledge to use. At the time, he was unable to speak to anyone about his father's sinister behavior. Bill struggled with the worry that if he shared these revelations, Felix might hurt his family. His desire for justice was stronger. Sadly, Bill's battle with cancer claimed his life in 2009, preventing him from seeing his mother's justice served. Bill, however, made sure to meticulously document his account of Felix's confession before he passed away. He asked the local preacher to write down his story so that the truth would be preserved for future generations. After a while, Mary Rose felt she had something important enough to ask the FBI to reopen the case. Although she was aware that there was no physical proof, she clung to the belief that the testimony of the Hortons, Sharon's brother, Felix's son, Bill, and herself could possibly give her the evidence she needed to pursue justice for her daughter. Mary had the opportunity to speak with a special FBI agent who dealt with cold cases and serial killers. He accepted Mary's account and determined Felix was a serial killer. Tragically, the cold case department took the brunt of the budget cuts, and the agent who had demonstrated support for Mary's cause was let go. Due to this unfortunate turn of events, Mary's quest for justice had no way to be furthered. She awoke to find herself exactly where she had started. Mary felt guilty for having inspired all the families to pursue justice. The families who trusted her, though, knew she wouldn't give up. Even though the conversation fizzled, Mary kept looking for someone to assess their situation. She simply felt a strong desire to put Felix behind bars. Over the course of nearly 30 years, Mary had been gradually worn down as a result of her resolve to fight for justice. While listening to the radio in June 2011, Mary heard about a detective who had solved 8 murder cases involving the infamous Burning, Mississippi murders, which were carried out by the Ku Klux Klan. Before he cracked them, these cases had remained unsolved for 50 years. The knowledge of this gave Mary the additional push she required. Mary immediately set out on a quest to find the investigator's contact information. Fortunately, she was able to find his phone number. Jerry Mitchell, a resident of Mississippi, was this person. Mary informed Jerry Mitchell about the cases and soon learned that Felix Vale had moved to Mississippi. As a result of this realization, Mary was faced with a decision she had to make. Mary Rose and Jerry Mitchell traveled through Mississippi in 2011 in order to reach the crucial spot where the criminal was. They arrived at a remote and desolate trailer park. Jerry wondered if Felix was watching them as they highlighted from their vehicle, but Mary didn't seem to care. She merely wished to put an end to Felix Vale's chapter. They noticed a broken window as they neared the trailer house. Mary crept through the window to enter the room in search of the truth without thinking twice about the danger. Jerry couldn't believe his eyes when she started throwing out machetes a short while later. Mary Rose and Jerry saw someone rushing in their direction as they looked around the house. But it wasn't Felix Vale. Rather was K.A. Faulkner, his sister, who appeared to be upset at their sudden intrusion. However, when Kay found out why Mary and Jerry were there, her initial anger at their unforeseen presence quickly subsided. When Kay Faulkner was spoken to, she admitted that she thought her brother had murdered those women. Only one day into the investigation, Jerry Mitchell recognized the quick progress made and seized the opportunity. He started by speaking right away with Mary Rose, the Hensleys, and the Hortons. As a result of these testimonies from the victim's family, in 2015, the book titled Gone was published. This book painstakingly documented the family's experiences. It received numerous awards and a great deal of immediate acclaim. The FBI became aware of this book, and after carefully considering all the relevant information, they decided to reopen the investigation. Mary, who had struggled for a long time, at last felt true happiness. Mary Horton's case was given priority by the FBI after a careful review of all the information that was available, primarily because her death had been officially declared, unlike that of Sharon and Annette, whose bodies had never been found. The problem was that this case had been going on for more than 50 years, which had led to reports and data being lost over time. The FBI persisted in their search for a district attorney who would be willing to take on this challenging old case, and they eventually found the right candidate, Hugh Holland. After reviewing the case, Hugh Holland didn't waste any time in sending out a squad to raid Felix's house. Authorities discovered Felix Vale's nearly 2,500-page journal. They learned from reading the journals that Felix made a conscious effort to dominate every woman in his life, frequently using physical force. Felix wrote about how he even enjoyed drinking raw blood in the journals, but there was nothing pertaining to the killings. Since Mary Horton drowned in the Coquizia River in 1962, Holland and his team decided to find someone who might have any information regarding the incident. Surprisingly, they discovered a man named Ike Absker, who was 90 years old. Felix Vale and Ike Absker shared a room when Felix Vale lived in Lake Charles. Ironically, Ike's father had a lot of boats and was a member of the search team that the sheriff's office hired to look for Mary Horton's body. Ike was on board in his father's boat when Mary's body was found. As they were talking during their meeting, Ike Absker, who was in a wheelchair, handed Hugh Holland an envelope with the word "keep" written on it. When Holland opened the envelope, he took 2 pictures out, and they turned out to be pictures of Mary Horton's body on the day it was discovered, showing severe bruising and wounds. When Holland finally came to the realization, he grabbed the photos and started his examination. Holland was working on the case in his office when a pathologist happened to walk by. Who murdered her? the pathologist said as he bowed down to look at the pictures. That was sufficient evidence and confirmation for Holland to declare Mary Horton's case to be a homicide. Now armed with sufficient proof and strong evidence, Holland quickly filed charges against 76-year-old Felix Vale for the murder of his first wife, Mary Horton. In a fitting turn of events, Louisiana, the very location where the case had started, became the location where it finally came to an end. 2014 served as the year of judgment when Felix Vale was captured and taken into custody. The disappearances of Sharon and Annette were also brought up during the trial. After all, Felix Vale was the last person to see them both. Holland asked Ike Abshire to testify because he understood how important his testimony was to the case and that it will be the most important piece of evidence used throughout the entire trial. Ike Abshire died at his home on May 17, 2014 from old age, nearly 3 months after giving his testimony. However, during the court proceedings, his testimony proved to be the deciding factor that all doubts were dispelled. The jury only needed about 10 minutes to reach a conclusion. Felix Vale received a life sentence after being found guilty. When Felix was found guilty, Mary Rose, Brian Hensley, and Will Horton, who were among the audience, breathed a sigh of relief. Mary and Brian were relieved that Felix was held accountable for his actions, finally receiving the punishment he deserved, even though his involvement in Annette's and Sharon's disappearance could not be proved. Brian Hensley was finally able to hold a memorial for his sister after the verdict. It makes no difference to the victim's family whether Felix was found guilty of killing just Mary Horton or all 3 women. What matters is that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. After Felix was taken into custody, justice was served, and Mary Rose's tenacious pursuit was rewarded. However, the emotional scar on her heart never fully healed, serving as a constant reminder of the agonizing pain she had experienced. Writing letters as if they were meant for Annette to read helped Mary cope with her lingering guilt over abandoning her daughter because of work. And she did so in the hopes that one day she would be able to move past it and eventually forgive herself. The central character of today's story, Maury Travis, was born on October 25, 1965. He was known by the nickname Toby and lived with his mother, Sandra Travis, and his father, Michael V. Travis in Carr Square, a public housing complex in St. Louis, Missouri. They later bought a house at 1001 Ford Avenue in Ferguson in April 1976. Maury Travis's childhood seemed relatively ordinary. While he was undeniably introverted and reserved, he was also known for his exceptional politeness and respect. Adults who interacted with him perceived him as someone who was highly mindful of etiquette and social norms. One teacher distinctly called Maury as an unusually quiet teenager, who even took the initiative to mow his neighbor's lawn. His demeanor at school was unremarkable, and those who knew him, including teachers, parents, and peers, never suspected him of being capable of violence. When police later interviewed individuals who attended school with Maury or lived near him, many of them didn't even recognize who he was. He didn't leave a memorable impression. In all of his childhood that is known to us, the separation of his parents was the only potential trauma that he may have experienced. He graduated from McClure High School in 1985 and served 2 years as an Army reservist. Following that, he worked as a medical and dental assistant. Additionally, he managed to secure employment locally with haulage companies and even volunteered at a local nursing home. Maury Travis's enrollment in Morris Brown College in 1986 at the age of 22 seemed like a positive step forward. However, it was also in this private institute in Atlanta where he encountered and formed a relationship with cocaine, sending his life into a downward spiral. His addiction quickly escalated to a severe level, costing him $300 a day. Maury's plunge into criminal activities to support his habit swiftly brought him to the attention of law enforcement the following year. Up until that point, he had a clean record, making his sudden shift into illegal behavior quite unexpected. Rather than a gradual escalation, his actions took a surprising and abrupt turn from his prior conduct. In March 1988, during his college spring break, Maury engaged in a string of robberies that raised eyebrows. To everyone's surprise, he targeted 5 shoe stores in St. Louis within 8 days. What added an unusual twist to these crimes was his choice of weapon. Instead of a loaded firearm, he used a plastic toy gun to instill fear. This abrupt shift into criminal behavior was truly unexpected, especially given his clean record prior to these incidents. This is where Maury Travis took a sharp turn into criminal activity. The armed robberies he committed resulted in his initial capture. Witnesses provided the police with details about his car, leading to his arrest. The detective handling the case was taken aback, as Maury didn't fit the typical image of a criminal. Upon being apprehended, Maury claimed to have hazy memories of the crimes, attributing it to drug influence. While awaiting sentencing, he underwent a drug rehabilitation program and claimed to have successfully overcome his addiction. Despite these efforts and his clean record before this, the court had taken his actions into account during proceedings. Character references poured in support of Maury, including one from a congressman and U.S. representative. These testimonials highlighted his rehabilitation efforts, asserting that his criminal behavior was an aberration in his character. Despite this acknowledgement, received a 15-year prison sentence on July 5, 1989, at the age of 23. This marked the start of his time behind bars for his criminal actions. From the outset, Maury realized that his time in prison wouldn't be easy. He attested to the inhospitable conditions, citing frequent assaults and an abundance of drugs that posed a significant threat to his rehabilitation. Having successfully addressed his dependency issues, he found himself surrounded by drugs in this challenging environment. In a desperate plea to the judge, Maury wrote a letter, urging him to reconsider his sentence, pouring his heart out in the hope of a more lenient outcome. In his plea to the judge, Maury wrote on how he was constantly thinking of taking his own life due to the horrible conditions he is living in. He ended by asking the judge to give him another chance in society. Maury was granted parole in 1994, serving only 5 years and 3 months of his sentence at the Farmington Correctional Center. His early release was primarily attributed to his exemplary behavior. Although he had 13 conduct violations, they were minor infractions. Upon his release, he moved into a duplex where neighbors regarded him as an excellent resident who didn't cause any disturbances. After serving time initially from March 1989 through June 1994, Maury faced additional prison stays due to drug-related charges from February 1998 to January 1999 due to repeatedly violating his parole. Once outside prison, he worked in various restaurants, keeping to himself mostly. He also displayed an unusual fixation for his 2000 black Mitsubishi Eclipse, spending considerable time cleaning and maintaining it. Although neighbors and classmates of Maury didn't have any suspicious information about him, one of his former girlfriends had something different to say. In March of 2001, Maury's girlfriend left him, and this was when bodies of women began to turn up around town. Between March 2001 and May 2002, Maury would actively pick up sex workers along the extended stretch of Broadway, known as the Stroll north of St. Louis. In fact, for suspected victims of Maury were later discovered in this area. It gained notoriety for its numerous crack houses and the availability of such workers. Maury would pick them up and then bring them back to his home in Ferguson. Once there, he would keep some of these women for days, subjecting them to his whims. However, it wasn't solely for his personal satisfaction. He recorded the horrifying events taking place in the basement. Videotapes documenting these acts were later discovered, concealed within a wall. Some of the video clips showed Maury engaging in consensual but rough role play involving bondage with women. There were also instances when he was seen using drugs, yet he would let them go unharmed. However, in other footage, Maury could be seen indulging in much darker activities, from keeping women hostage for days in his dungeon to strangling them to death. Law enforcement initially struggled to comprehend why he chose to spare certain women while murdering others. One hypothesis suggests that the tipping point might have been when he discovered that a particular sex worker had children. It appeared that this discovery triggered a violent rage in him, since they chose drugs over their children. Although it's not confirmed, that's the association they'd drawn. He also made them perform the most unbelievable rituals. More, he would get them to dance in white clothes. Then at times he'd get them to wear sunglasses where the lenses were completely blacked out so they couldn't see. By doing this, he was taking power away from them completely. He would then restrain their legs with a rope and handcuff them. At times, he'd even cover their eyes with duct tape. In the footage that they found, they saw these women shackled to a wooden post with Maury verbally taunting them. He would tell them what was going to happen or they needed to break them as well. At times, he'd get angry because he'd find out that these women had children. He also used to criticize them, expressing aggression and violence due to their choice of drugs over their kids. In some of the earliest footage, Maury is actually seen standing over a kneeling naked woman, heavily bound with a rope and handcuffed. Then he suddenly grabs the belt, snaps it tightly around her neck and strangles her until she's unconscious and she's limp. He may even have broken her neck. He then just leaves her body face down on the floor. It's truly horrifying to think that Maury Travis was able to carry out such horrific crimes without raising suspicion. One thing we know is Maury Travis's ability to blend into the background made him a master of disguise. His unassuming nature allowed him to operate unnoticed, making him the last person anyone would suspect of such heinous crimes. On July 31, 2000, the discovery of the first known victim, Mary Shields, 61, in East St. Louis, Illinois, began a haunting pattern. In the months that followed, the tragedies escalated. On March 24, 2001, the body of Cassandra F. Walker, 19, was found in Washington Park, Illinois. Alyssa Greenway, a 34-year-old caught in a seemingly hopeless cycle of addiction, was discovered deceased on April 1, 2001, in Washington Park, Illinois. Her body showed signs of strangulation with ligature marks found on her wrist and ankles. Near her body, authorities found a tire impression identified as a Bridgestone Potenza tire, which was photographed for further analysis. Not long after, on May 15, 2001, Teresa Wilson, 36, was discovered in West Alton, Missouri. May 30, 2001, marked the discovery of Betty James, 46, in St. Louis, with an evident tire impression distinct from earlier scenes. The St. Louis Police Department strongly believed that all these murders were the work of the same individual, as the crimes were executed in a similar manner. By June 29, 2001, Verona Thompson, 36, was found in West Alton, Missouri. Following this, on August 25, 2001, Yvonne Cruz, 50, was discovered in East St. Louis, Illinois. The haunting silence after October 8, 2001, when Brenda Beasley, age 33, was found dead in East St. Louis, Illinois, raised speculation. Authorities speculated three possible scenarios. Either the perpetrator was in custody, had passed away, or had relocated from the area. However, the unsettling quiet broke as the year changed. The cycle resumed, claiming for more lives. The first unidentified victim was found on January 30, 2002. Another unidentified victim was found near Muscatoa, Illinois on March 11, 2002. The next unidentified victim was discovered in Columbia, Illinois on March 28, 2002. And the final unidentified victim was reported in West Alton, Missouri on May 25, 2002. Each day marked a sorrowful moment, revealing a frightening pattern. What ultimately led to uncovering the killer will stun you like never before. In an attempt to bring attention to one of the victims and maintain public interest in the investigation, Bill Smith penned an article. This was about Teresa Wilson, a victim, and her life struggles leading up to her unfortunate demise. He named the killer the Streetwalker Strangler. The article was published in the paper's May 19, 2002 issue. Less than a week later, Smith received a letter at his desk. While it's not uncommon for media personnel to receive letters or correspondence, this letter had an unusual return address on the envelope. Thraldom, 325 to 331, Lafayette Street, New York, 10012. The letter bore a St. Louis postmark indicating it had been mailed locally. The zip code 10012 encompasses portions of Manhattan's Soho, NoHo, Nolita, and Greenwich Village neighborhoods. The letter bore a St. Louis postmark indicating it had been mailed locally. However, the thraldom address is fictional. So why would someone use that term for an address? According to Merriam-Webster, Thraldom refers to the state of being an enslaved person. It also served as the name of a bondage website. The letter was typed using what appeared to be Lucida handwriting font in red ink with minimal punctuation. Smith initially believed it was a prank. He quickly realized the letter was no joke and that a person claiming to be the Streetwalker Strangler was contacting him. The letter read, "Dear Bill, nice sob story about Teresa Wilson. Write one about Greenway. Write a good one and I'll tell you where many others are to prove I'm real. Here's directions to number 17. Search in a 50-yard radius from the X. Put the story in the Sunday paper like the last." The letter Bill received included a map of West Alton marked with an X indicating the location of a body. The sender offered to reveal the locations of additional victims and as evidence of their identity, provided directions to number 17 accompanied by a typed internet-generated map. After finding a skeleton at the marked spot, authorities focused on the map which appeared to have been generated using an internet mapping service. They found a possible match on Expedia.com, according to an affidavit by FBI agent Melanie Jimenez. On May 30, 2002, Expedia informed Jimenez that Microsoft, based in Redmond, Washington, provided the data for its map site. The FBI requested records of any maps of West Alton made between May 18, 2002, the date of the newspaper story that prompted the letter, and May 21, 2002, the postmark on the envelope. Took 4 days to receive a response. On June 3, 2002, Microsoft reported that only one computer had accessed the map during the specified time period. The company further revealed that on May 20th, the computer had zoomed in on the map of the West Alton, Missouri area approximately 10 times in chronological order, eventually generating a map that matched the one sent to the Post-Dispatch. However, Microsoft could not provide a name, only an IP address, a meaningless string of numbers to most people, 65.227.106.78. To translate the IP number into a name, the FBI turned to WorldCom Incorporated, which provided local telephone numbers to connect internet services to their dial-up customers. WorldCom assigns a temporary IP address to each customer for each internet session. The challenge was not just to identify who used 65.227.106.78, but also to determine who used it at the specific time in question. The next day, on June 4, 2022, WorldCom's Internet Division, UUNet, identified the user as MSN/Maury Travis. This led to the identification of the user's real name, Maury Troy Travis of Ferguson. Before this, back in 2001, Maury also hinted about his crime to one of his co-workers. He told him that East St. Louis was a good place to hide objects due to minimal police presence. He also told his co-worker's girlfriend, who worked at a TV station, that prostitutes were dumped in the same area. Maury didn't state that he was the one who killed them, but he said he knew about it from a friend. The taunting letter to the editor and his hints to co-workers suggest that Maury might have been one of those serial killers who craved attention. His actions indicate a desire to be found, a twisted sense of power derived from the fear he instilled in the community. This information provided the basis for surveillance, and on June 7, 2002, an arrest and search warrant. The warrant led to the discovery of evidence, including DNA and tire trademarks, linking Maury, a 36-year-old waiter, to some of the killings. Investigators launched a thorough search of Maury's residence in Ferguson, Missouri, uncovering a horrifying scene. Hidden within the depths of his home, they discovered a torture chamber. The ground floor of his home was tidy and well-maintained. The woman who lived with him, identified as his girlfriend, told police she had no clue about the basement and had never been there. While police officers examined the house and basement, FBI agents and other investigators conducted a 2-hour interrogation of Maury in his living room. They learned that his mother owned the residence and had allowed him to stay there. Authorities later revealed that Maury evaded giving direct answers, and instead inquired about how they had located him. Upon being informed that the computer-printed map had led them to his doorstep, became enraged. Shortly after police escorted Maury outside and placed him in a car, he consented to accompanying the police downtown for further questioning. Computer forensics experts entered the house to inspect Maury's computer, where they uncovered drafts of the letter sent to journalist Bill Smith. Downstairs, investigators uncovered a house of horrors. They found blood stains on the walls and on the ceiling and on the carpet and furniture as well. Within this, they discovered chilling torture instruments, menacing stun gun and newspaper clippings documenting his heinous crimes. But the most disturbing discovery was yet to come. Videotapes capturing Maury's unspeakable acts of violence, subjecting his victims to horrific acts. The evidence from this torture chamber, coupled with DNA analysis, suggested that he committed the murders of between 12 and 20 women. He had been preying on vulnerable individuals, many of whom were drug addicts and sex workers, in the states of Missouri and Illinois between 2000 and 2022. Travis asked for a soda during questioning. Later, the can he drank from was sent to the lab for testing. DNA swabs were taken from the area near the opening of the can for epithelial cells in Travis's saliva, which could be used for DNA testing. Travis's DNA profile was then compared to the biological material found on two of the murder victims, Yvonne Cruz and Brenda Beasley. St. Louis Police Captain Harry Heeger said that the investigators also found a crude diagram in Maury's home, showing plans for a basement extension. Heeger said that Maury was planning to build 2 cells in the basement where he could chain the women, and then he was planning to build vents connecting the basement to the outside. Heeger said that Maury also made a list of things that he needed to keep the woman captive for some time, and that one of the items on the list was adult diapers. We spoke about the victims who were identified, but now let us uncover a few who are not known till the present. On May 25, 2002, the tragic case of St. Charles County, Jane Doe, came to light, adding another victim to the list of serial killer Maury Troy Travis. The woman's remains were discovered near West Alton, Missouri, leaving her identity shrouded in mystery for 21 years. The discovery of St. Charles County Jane Doe unfolded following the anonymous letter sent to local reporter Bill Smith on May 21, 2002. The skeletal remains of St. Charles County Jane Doe were found west of Highway 67 and south of St. Charles Street, scattered over a 30-foot wide area. It was determined that she was a female between the ages of 25 and 35, of black ethnicity, and approximately 5 feet 4 inches in height. 1 or more limbs and 1 or both hands were not recovered. The remains found at the crime scene included a sleeveless coarse blue denim dress with metal buttons, a black and silver V-neck stretch shirt with 3/4-length sleeves, a black spandex top, a torn piece of blue jean-type material, a white cotton tube sock, a blue shoestring-type tie-up in the back, and a thin white cotton fragment. A few months prior, on March 28, 2002, another discovery had been made: the remains of an unidentified woman. She would come to be known as Monroe County Jane Doe, one of the 3 victims of the notorious St. Louis serial killer, Maury Travis. Her identity remains a mystery, her story shrouded in silence. She was believed to be between the ages of 29 and 50, her African-American heritage evident in her skin tone. She stood at 5 feet 1 inch tall. Her petite frame weighed about 105 pounds. Her dark brown hair bore the mark of a healed fracture on her forehead, possibly a mark of a childhood injury. There was no indication that she had ever given birth. At the time of her discovery, they could find only skeletal remains, along with a green shirt and the letter M and the word Mavericks in orange lettering. Her attire was completed by khaki canvas shorts and a brown leather belt with a silver buckle. These simple garments provided the only clues to her identity, silent witnesses to her life. Just a few weeks before that, on March 11, 2002, in Marine, Illinois, the remains of Madison County Jane Doe were found. Madison County Jane Doe was believed to be between the ages of 23 and 30. Her ethnicity identified as black. Her height was estimated to be between 5 feet 1 inch and 5 feet 6 inches, and she weighed around 105 pounds. She also had dark hair. When discovered, the victim's decomposed body was clad in a red and white checkered flannel style shirt, bearing the brand Tommy Hilfiger and the pair of gray shorts from the brand's Second Skins. A little under 2 months before that, St. Clair County Jane Doe, a woman whose identity remains a mystery, was discovered on January 30, 2002. Her skeletal remains were found in Mascoda, Illinois, though the exact cause of her death remains undetermined. She is presumed to be one of the unidentified victims of serial killer Maury Troy Travis. At the time of her discovery, she was believed to be between the ages of 20 and 40 of African American descent. Her skeletal remains revealed clues about her life, including 3 piercings in her right ear, a healed fracture above her left ankle, and additional healed fractures on her nasal bones, left second rib, wrist, and below her neck. She was found wearing a black velour sleeveless catsuit, bearing the brand Jason Matthews, with full-length legs. 2 yellow metal rings adorned her left middle finger. People were shocked and confused by how a man with such an appealing personality could be involved in these terrible crimes. The mother of one of his ex-girlfriends from Pagedale expressed her shock and disbelief over the news of Maury's arrest. Her daughter had dated him back in 2001, and she described him as a perfect gentleman who always seemed happy and laid back. She couldn't believe that the man she knew could be different from the person now accused of such heinous crimes. Maury was suspected of being involved in the murders of 12 women, and he was also charged with 2 counts of kidnapping. Federal court documents linked him to these crimes. Police investigators believed that Maury may have killed more than 17 women in total. His arrest on June 7, 2002, Maury was taken into custody for interrogation and was placed on preventative monitoring until his trial for the alleged offenses. Just when St. Louis thought justice had been served with Maury's arrest on June 7, 2002, the city saw darkness again. 3 days later, on June 10, 2002, Maury planned to escape his sentence. He did that in the most unthinkable way possible. Maury Travis reportedly wrote a brief note on a sheet of paper in his 8th floor jail cell in Clayton. Outside the cell, another inmate tasked with monitoring Maury attempted to keep watch through a window. Maury had no desire to spend the rest of his life in prison or face execution by injection. He conveyed to those who would read his final words. Instead, he decided to end his life on his own terms. He explained that he left a note to demonstrate, "You guys didn't kill me." His note read, "Dear Mom, I'm sorry for the pain this caused you and the family. My death seems to be the only way out and a fast end to all the publicity. You were the best mother a man could have, but I've been sick for a long time, sick in the head, since I was about 14. I don't know why, I was just sick. I've never felt normal or happy at any time in my life. I think about the life I lead and what's ahead of me. This seems the best solution for all involved, especially me, because I won't spend the rest of my life locked up, or worse, let them kill me with a needle. Tell Grandma, Marina, James, and everybody, I love them dearly. I love you the most, but you know that. Forever your son, Toby Travis." Jail regulations prohibited the inmate assigned to the anti-self-harm vigil from maintaining a clear view of what was to transpire, and the guards violating jail rules skipped 2 15-minute checks, providing Maury with 45 minutes of privacy to carry out his plan. According to Clayton police, Maury meticulously threaded a torn strip of bedsheet through small holes in a jail wall vent, 6 feet from the floor, and looped the other end around his neck. He placed a pillowcase over his head, stuffed additional cloth into his mouth, and somehow managed to tie his hands behind his back. 12 years after Maury himself died in prison, his mother, Sandra Travis, still owned the home where he committed his horrific acts in 2014. She rented the home to Katrina McGaw without mentioning the house's dark past. McGaw learned about the house's history from a television documentary and requested to break her lease, but Sandra refused. News 4 contacted Sandra, who claimed she had informed McGaw about the house's past. McGaw denied this, stating she would have remembered the murders if Sandra had told her. Technically, landlords are not obligated to disclose information about a home's past. In this country, landlords are only required to report physical defects. The St. Louis Housing Authority intervened, allowing McGaw to move out at the end of the month. Despite Sandra's objections, the situation was complex. On one hand, it was understandable that Sandra, the mother of a serial killer, would want to put the past behind her. She was legally entitled to rent the house without disclosing any information about past events, but it may not be ethically right to do so. On the other hand, Maga, who had a 2-year-old daughter, was uncomfortable living in a house where women were tortured and murdered. She also mentioned that her daughter had been occasionally playing near the same pool in the basement where Maury Travis tied up his victims. Considering how disturbing the whole situation was, McGaw understandably wanted to move out as soon as possible. Sadly, the victims found no closure. Moreover, several victims remain unidentified, adding to the heartbreak of this case. After witnessing these tragic events, one thing becomes evident. You never truly know who lives next door. This monstrous individual was carrying out these heinous acts right beneath everyone's noses, escaping notice even from those close to him. What's truly confounding is the mystery surrounding his actions. How could he commit 17 murders in his basement without anyone suspecting a thing? Not even the woman he dated? And then the ultimate enigma. Why did he choose to end his own life in that prison cell? Was the prison reality more horrific than the agony these women faced? Or was he such a narcissist that he couldn't bear anyone else deciding when his life would end? In the heart of New Jersey, situated in a region called Woodbridge Township, it's a place where diverse cultures blend seamlessly, creating a unique charm. Woodbridge is more than just a location. It's a home filled with warmth and stories. Talking about safety, Woodbridge Township is a generally secure place. With a low crime percentage, the community enjoys a sense of peace and security. The parks and waterfront not only provide scenic beauty, but also serve as communal spaces where families and individuals can unwind without worry. Yet beneath this friendly exterior, there's a chilling tale that shook the town. The story of Bill McGuire is a dark moment that unfolded in this seemingly peaceful town. It's a reminder that even in the most everyday places, mysteries can be hidden. William Theodore McGuire, also known as Bill, was born on September 21, 1964 in Bloomfield, New Jersey. He was the son of William Christopher McGuire and Ruth Theodora Sell McGuire. Bill grew up in Bloomfield and graduated from Bloomfield High School in 1982. He then went on to study computer science at Rutgers University, where he graduated in 1986. After college, Bill worked as a computer programmer for a variety of companies. He was a hard worker and was well respected by his colleagues. In his free time, Bill enjoyed playing golf, fishing, and spending time with his family. Bill was a kind and generous man who was always willing to help others. He was a charismatic and witty individual. He got married to Marcy Pollock in 1986, but that marriage was short-lived, leading to their divorce in 1994. The couple moved to Virginia Beach in 1986, where Bill worked as an electronics technician in the Navy. Marcy, originally from Vernon, New Jersey, joined him in this relocation. Around 1990, and Marcy returned to the Atlantic City area. However, it was in this new setting that Bill's behavior changed drastically. He became deeply involved in excessive gambling and drinking. This is when Marcy noticed a stark deterioration in their relationship. The situation escalated in 1995, when Marcy filed a restraining order against him after Bill threw rocks through her window, ultimately leading to their divorce. Bill then met Melanie Lynn Slate in 1998 at a restaurant in Woodbridge, New Jersey, where Melanie was working part-time while attending nursing school. Born on October 8, 1972 in America, Melanie Lynn McGuire, formerly known as Melanie Lynn Slate, grew up in Ridgewood in Middletown Township, New Jersey, attending Middletown High School South. Her academic journey took her to Rutgers University, where she pursued a dual major in math and psychology. Graduating in 1994, achieving the second position in her class, she earned her nursing diploma from the Charles E. Gregory School of Nursing, now Raritan Bay Medical Center, in 1997. When he met Melanie, she perfectly complemented his personality. They quickly fell in love and were married the following year in 1999. The couple soon started a family, welcoming 2 sons into their lives. In 2000, they had their first child, a son. 2 years after that, in 2002, they had their second child, another son. Their marriage seemed picture-perfect, filled with love and laughter. However, beneath the surface, cracks were beginning to appear. Financial struggles began to weigh heavily on the couple. Bill, a computer programmer, had always been responsible and financially secure, but his gambling addiction took a toll on their finances. As debts piled up, stress on their relationship grew. Melanie, a nurse, worked tirelessly to support the family, but it was becoming increasingly difficult to make ends meet. In addition to their financial woes, Bill's gambling addiction also led to emotional turmoil. He would often disappear for days at a time, leaving Melanie to care for the children and manage the household on her own. The trust that was once the foundation of their marriage began to erode, replaced by suspicion and resentment. Despite the growing tensions, Melanie remained committed to her marriage, hoping that things would eventually improve. She tried to help Bill overcome his addiction, but his struggles continued, further straining their relationship. In 2004, the McGuires were planning to move to a larger home in Warren County, New Jersey. They had closed on a new house on April 28, 2004, but before they could move in, the unthinkable happened. On April 29, 2004, vanished from his seemingly ordinary life, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a family in despair. Where did Bill go? What could have been the reason for his sudden disappearance? Weeks had slipped by without a trace of Bill. His absence left a gaping void in the lives of his caring wife and children, but little did they know that Bill's fate was far more extraordinary than they could have ever imagined. On the early morning of May 5, 2004, 3 fishermen, Chris, Don, and their children went on a fishing trip from Virginia Beach toward the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. As they headed north, parallel to the tunnel, they stumbled upon an unexpected catch, a dark green suitcase floating in the water. Intrigued by the mysterious object, they hauled it aboard their boat. The suitcase was surprisingly heavy, and upon opening it, they made a chilling discovery. Inside was a black sack, containing a pair of legs. Horrified by their find, the fishermen immediately contacted police. They wondered if there were more suitcases hidden in the depths of the Chesapeake Bay, each concealing another piece of a human body. Soon police started actively looking for the other missing pieces of this disturbing puzzle. Just days after the first suitcase was found, a student studying the nature reserve on Fisherman's Island made another chilling discovery. A second suitcase, identical to the first, was found on the beach on May 10, 2004. This time, however, it was a human torso, including the arms and head. The wait for answers continued as the search for the missing body parts intensified. 5 days after the second suitcase was found, a fisherman made the final gruesome discovery. On May 15, 2004, a third suitcase, again identical to the first two, was found floating in the Chesapeake Bay. Inside were the victim's pelvis and legs. With the Chesapeake Bay's vast expanse making the search area challenging, investigators decided to turn to the public for help. They released the victim's sketch in the media, hoping that someone would recognize him. Incredibly, it took only a few days for the sketch to yield results. Susan Rice and John Rice, close friends of Bill who hadn't seen him in weeks, played a pivotal role in identifying his body. When they saw a sketch of the victim on TV on May 21, 2004, Sue immediately recognized her friend's distinctive features. Skeptical at first, her husband John also agreed that the sketch bore a striking resemblance to Bill. Recognizing their friend's face, they promptly notified the authorities. The couple also provided crucial information to the investigation. They recalled that Bill had recently been involved in a physical altercation with his wife, Melanie McGuire, and had stormed out of their home. They assumed that he had impulsively fled to Atlantic City, distracting himself on a gambling spree. However, weeks passed without any contact from Bill, raising concern among his friends and family. With Bill's identity confirmed, investigators immediately initiated a fingerprint analysis. Fortunately, Bill's fingerprints were on file and a match was quickly established. The once missing man was now the victim of a horrific crime. Bill's past was shrouded in mystery with rumors of gambling addiction, domestic abuse, and even a restraining order. Bill's ex-wife, Marcy Pollock, had also spoken out about the emotional and physical abuse she endured during their marriage. She had described their relationship as deteriorating rapidly after their wedding, culminating in a restraining order in 1995 after Bill threw a rock at her window. These allegations painted a troubling picture of Bill's character, and only made it difficult to identify the perpetrator. Investigators were now faced with the task of piecing together the events that led to Bill McGuire's death and bringing the perpetrator to justice. The question remains, who was the killer? Imagine a loved one vanishing without a trace. Even if it's just for a day. You'd be worried and scared, and you'd do everything you could to find them. Even if you had an argument with them, you would still report the missing to the police. However, in this case, the police received no missing person reports from Melanie regarding Bill's disappearance after being away for almost a month. Instead of immediately reporting him missing, she sought legal counsel from a divorce attorney. On April 30th, 2004, she filed a restraining order against him, further indicating that she felt unsafe in his presence. The police were surprised that Bill's wife hadn't reported him missing, especially since they had found the person in the sketch through Bill's friends. The cops decided to look into Melanie McGuire, and what they found was pretty odd. On April 30th, 2004, just 2 days after the big fight between her and Bill, she did something that would make most folks raise an eyebrow. Melanie believed he might be in Atlantic City gambling, so she planned to drive down there and search for his car. She said her goal was to annoy him by parking the car in the most hectic part of town. But interestingly, here was how people reacted to her. As the police began monitoring Melanie's activities, they also started tracking her phone calls. In the midst of seemingly ordinary conversations, the police discovered a crucial piece of evidence. In one of these intercepted conversations, Melanie talked to Jim Finn, an old acquaintance from nursing school who had a crush on her. After losing touch for some time, they reconnected in February 2004 with Melanie reaching out when she needed something. Aware of Jim's interest in firearms, she discussed Bill's behavior with him before his disappearance, and Jim, still harboring feelings for Melanie, suggested obtaining a gun for self-defense. However, investigators listening to their conversations concluded that Jim had no knowledge of any plans related to a murder. When questioned by detectives, Jim was surprised to learn about Melanie purchasing a gun and was unaware of her involvement in any foul play. She then purchased a .38 caliber handgun on April 26, 2004 from a store in Easton, Pennsylvania. This was just 2 days before Bill went missing. Despite constant monitoring and scrutiny, Melanie denied any participation, maintaining her innocence. There was another unexplained road trip, this time to Delaware, just 5 days after her husband's disappearance. Melanie had told Dr. Miller that she was actually furniture shopping in the early hours of May 4, 2004. However, investigators suspect that this trip to Delaware for furniture was a cover-up. The route she took would typically lead to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel, contrary to the usual path via the New Jersey Turnpike toward the Delaware Memorial Bridge and Route 13, which heads south to the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and Tunnel. She stated that this theory was absurd because Virginia Beach was an additional 450 miles away from Delaware. Considering the considerable distance, it was implausible to cover such a vast stretch within a limited time frame. Was Melanie McGuire truly acting alone, or was there an accomplice involved? Maybe it was Jim Flynn, but why would someone go to such lengths for a girl he had a crush on years ago? Yet consider this, it could be someone else, someone closer. A secret affair, perhaps? Was it someone who would do anything, even kill, for her? The voice you heard was of Dr. Brad Miller. He was a partner at RMA Associates, and Melanie worked as one of his nurses. The affair between them officially began when Melanie was 8 months pregnant with her second child, at least for both of them. After Melanie returned from maternity leave, she and Dr. Miller began a full-blown affair. It appeared as if they were falling deeply in love with each other. Despite their marital ties in young children, investigators uncovered mounting evidence indicating Melanie McGuire's involvement in her husband's murder. Bill's car held a bottle of chloral hydrate, a sedative, along with 2 syringes prescribed by Bradley Miller, who had said the prescription was written in Melanie's handwriting. During the investigation, Jennifer Seymour, a state police computer expert, analyzed the computers and handheld devices belonging to the McGuires, including a desktop computer situated in their apartment. Her examination revealed that between April 11th and April 26th, 2004, several concerning topics were searched online. Among the searches were inquiries about undetectable poisons, how to purchase guns illegally, how to commit murder, gun laws, and toxic insulin levels. Among all the evidence, the gun, the internet search, or the affair, one particular detail left people confused. It was the purchase of a $500,000 house, which occurred right before his disappearance. They ended up placing a substantial deposit on an impressive home in New Jersey. This residence was quite lavish, with a significant amount of land and carrying a price tag of $500,000. This seemed contradictory. On one hand, Melanie was growing closer to Dr. Miller, but on the other, she was making a major investment in a new property with Bill. On April 28, 2004, they were set to close on the house at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Melanie stayed in touch with Dr. Miller throughout, as he pleaded with her not to proceed with the house purchase. He expressed a wish to be with her and build a future together. Melanie assured him she would handle it. After closing on the house, they returned to their rented townhouse. Bill, quite excited, called John Rice, reportedly in a very happy state. Melanie's final conversation that night was with Dr. Miller. She informed him that they had closed on the house and mentioned that Bill was asleep on the couch after having some red wine. Melanie planned to discuss matters with Bill when he woke, intending to request a divorce. Melanie recounted the events as a significant argument between her and Bill, stating that they had a fight in the early hours of the morning, around 3 or 4 o'clock. It all started regarding the house they were purchasing, with Melanie mentioning that she had settled for that particular house. Bill's reaction was immediate and intense, expressing dissatisfaction and stating that it wasn't what he wanted. He mentioned his preference for a cheaper house in Virginia, which Melanie refused, leading to an escalating, heated exchange. Melanie further described that the argument turned physical, specifying that Bill pushed a dryer sheet into her mouth, revealing his fixation with dryer sheets during such moments. He informed her that he was leaving and wouldn't return, even instructing her to explain to their children why they wouldn't have a father. He communicated this through the bathroom door while he packed and made several trips up and down the stairs, continuously criticizing her. Her final words to him were a plea to stop. After discovering the suitcases, the police were finally on the verge of bringing justice to Bill. One crucial piece of evidence the police were eagerly seeking, yearning for proof of Melanie's involvement in the dismemberment, remained elusive. Despite thoroughly searching her home, they found no blood, no bullets, nothing. There was no direct physical evidence linking her to the murder. Over a year after Bill McGuire's murder, on June 5, 2005, Melanie McGuire was arrested while dropping off her kids at a daycare in Madison. She was charged with first-degree murder in what became known as the suitcase killer case. Melanie pleaded not guilty and was released on $750,000 bail. In 2005, a grand jury indicted her on 4 counts, raising her bail to $2.1 million. She was again released. Another indictment later accused her of writing letters that obstructed the investigation. 3 years after the murder, in 2007, Melanie's trial began. The prosecution argued that she killed her husband in 2004 to start a new life with her boyfriend. Lead investigator Prezioso testified that the evidence points to a well-planned murder. Melanie maintained her innocence, stating that her husband was a compulsive gambler who had become increasingly erratic. However, a spokesman for the New Jersey Division of Criminal Justice disputed her characterization, saying that there was no indication that Mr. McGuire was anything more than an occasional gambler. Melanie's defense team argued that the murder and dismemberment could not have happened in the Woodbridge apartment because there was no evidence to support this claim. They highlighted the absence of blood, tissue, or DNA in the apartment, as well as the lack of a bullet or saw marks. Additionally, there were no testimonies from neighbors regarding gunshots or the sound of a power saw. 3 years later, on April 23, 2007, Melanie McGuire, 34, was found guilty of killing William T. McGuire, dismembering his body, packing the pieces in 3 suitcases, and tossing them into the Chesapeake Bay. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 63 years and 9 months. She also received a concurrent 10-year sentence for desecrating human remains and a further 5-year sentence for perjury for lying to a family court judge about her husband's whereabouts after he vanished in 2004. William and Melanie McGuire's 2 sons, whose identities are protected for their privacy and safety, were last seen with their father on April 28, 2004. Melanie dropped the boys, aged 2 and 4, off at their daycare as usual around 8:20 a.m. After their routine, the boys returned home expecting to see their father, but he was nowhere to be found. William and Melanie's sons were placed in the care of Bill's elder sister, Cindy Legoshi, a realtor at the Weichert office in Franklin Lakes. Cindy, along with her husband, pharmacist Bill Legosche of Wyckoff, New Jersey, were deemed capable of providing a loving and nurturing environment for the boys. They already had 2 adult children of their own, Laura Legosche and Max Legosche, and were experienced parents. When the question of custody arose, the 2 boys were sent to live with Cindy and Bill, especially since they were already a close-knit family. After Melanie was convicted of murdering her husband, her family initiated a custody battle with Cindy, but to no avail. As a result, William and Melanie's sons continue to reside in New Jersey with their aunt, uncle, and cousins, the only family they've ever known. In 2007, during Melanie's murder trial, Cindy presented evidence that both of her sister and lost children, then aged 5 and 7, had been diagnosed with autism. Cindy had grown concerned about their well-being upon noticing their behavior and had them tested. Due to the protection of their identities, no further information regarding their current status is available. However, it's known that the boys have not had contact with their mother since before her conviction. If you've watched the entire video without missing a moment, you probably have numerous questions about the investigation and arrest. After looking at her history as a nurse and her caring and charismatic nature, it's hard to even consider if someone like Melanie could commit such a heinous crime. The high-profile nature of the case prompted a range of opinions among viewers. Many believe that there are many gaps in the story, beginning with the fact that she doesn't quite appear to be capable of murder. Even if she had the motive, how could this small woman accomplish it all alone? Did someone assist her? Was she unfairly charged? Perhaps the jury overlooked someone? Or was the accusation entirely mistaken? If you're pondering these questions, you're not alone. Many people, including criminology professors Megan Sachs and Amy Schlossberg, doubt Melanie McGuire's guilt. They host a podcast, Direct Appeal, questioning her conviction, pointing out that Melanie doesn't fit the typical profile of a murderer. The key witness for the prosecution, a forensic ballistics expert, stated that the bullets found in Bill's case were identified as .38 caliber lead cutter bullets. Subsequently, they found an error on the gun manufacturer's website. What's puzzling is that the website information was altered after the unfortunate incident involving Bill McGuire's murder. Post this, they also discussed the garbage bags found at the McGuire residence and the one Bill was found in. The investigator highlights that these characteristics indicate that the 2 bags were made at the same facility, on the same production line, and within a very brief time frame. Furthermore, they express confidence in their conclusion, drawing from conducted tests and observed results, affirming that the bags were produced during the same run. Sachs also emphasizes the physical challenges of dismembering a body and the lack of a believable crime scene. In a video demonstration, they conducted 2 tests. The first was a suitcase weight test, assessing whether Melanie, weighing 118 pounds, could have thrown a suitcase of similar weight, around 80 pounds, across a bridge with a guardrail height of 40 inches. Their findings suggested that a reasonably manageable weight to lift was around 40 pounds, approximately half of Melanie's weight. Despite a movie about her case coming out, Melanie remains in prison. Despite the attention, she insists she didn't kill her husband or dispose of his body parts in suitcase. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.